public. And then the applicant also notified me that they've also provided an updated wireless communications facility necessity case, which includes the Soquel Village sites. And that's provided for you and the public as well. And they'll be going into that. I just wanted to make it available. And as a result of the revised RF report, I'll be making a revision to the finding on page 13. I will reiterate it, but I will say it here now, in case it gets lost in the process. On page 13, finding 5, the maximum ground level at ground will be, instead of 4.7%, that's 1.3% of the applicable public exposure radio frequency exposure limit established by the Federal Communications Commission. With that, the subject property is located along the west side of Soquel San Jose Road, just outside Soquel Village. The property is approximately 88 acres and is flat or gently sloped along Soquel San Jose Road and slopes upward to the east. The area along Soquel San Jose Road is developed with the Seventh-day Adventist camp, which operates seasonally. The area at the top of the slope is undeveloped, with the exception of an existing access road to the top of the slope. The site is not mapped for the presence of environmental resources or constraints in the area. And this includes no biotic resources, no visual resources, no sensitive habitat or otherwise, or archaeological resources. The proposed facility is set back approximately 200 feet or more from the top of the slope and is over 1,200 feet west of Soquel San Jose Road. No vegetation is proposed to be removed for the construction of the facility, with the exception of site clearing of the existing grass area. So the applicant is proposing a 44-foot tall mono pine. It's a wireless facility camouflaged as a monopole pine. This includes a 30-foot by 30-foot enclosure, including a 15 by 8-foot concrete equipment pad, including equipment cabinets and emergency generator. The equipment shelter is proposed to be set into the grade following natural topography. Grading plans are provided in your plan packet, proposing approximately 104 cubic yards of excavation, 12 cubic yards of fill. Given that it's set into the hill, there'll be a cinder block wall located below grade for most part, with the exception of a few feet of cinder block above, as well as a 5-foot to 7-foot wood fence enclosure. The 44-foot proposed mono tree is proposed at the center of the enclosure with 12 antennas at approximately 39-foot height on the pole, including associated equipment such as radio units and signal amplifiers. The applicant's also proposing a 200-foot utility trench to a series of 4 power poles connecting to an existing power pole to power the facility. All wireless facilities, as you know, are subject to a commercial development permit with approval by the zoning administrator. The property is zoned residential agriculture and designated mountain residential by the general plan. As most folks know, the residential agricultural zone district is a restricted zone. Sites located within the restricted zone pursuant to the wireless communications ordinance are required to provide an alternative site analysis, proving that the proposed facility would eliminate or substantially reduce one or more significant gaps in the carrier's network, and that there are no viable, technically feasible, and environmentally equivalent or superior potential alternatives outside the restricted areas that could eliminate or substantially reduce the significant gap. So just as some background about alternative analysis, the alternative analysis evaluates potential sites meeting the wireless service objectives that's established by the wireless carrier, the zoning restrictions, that would be sites that are allowed to be used for wireless facilities, the access requirements, leasing requirements, topography, visual impacts, owner interest, etc., And this includes evaluation of potential co-location of existing towers, roof mounts, flush mounts, etc. It's the primary tool that we use as established by the code in establishing the most viable site for wireless facilities that meets all the requirements of the wireless code, including that the wireless facility be located in the least visually obtrusive location. So the applicant has provided the alternative analysis that has evaluated all sites in the search ring available to meet the coverage objective to establish the most suitable site that meets both their cellular objectives and minimizes visual and environmental impacts. And that's attached as Exhibit H. So as enumerated, the study substantiates that there are no sites available that would serve to eliminate or substantially reduce the gap in the carrier's network while also being viable, technically feasible, and environmentally equivalent. Essentially what that means is that they establish a search ring for the proposed facility and they evaluate all the sites that are allowed for that use. They did that. They've evaluated every site that does allow the use, and the alternative analysis concluding either no interest on the part of the owner, or that the use is either physically unable to provide service, or it's in a location that might have greater visual impacts or require setback reductions. The bulk of the properties that are zoned to allow it are zoned agriculture, and they are on Cherryvale across to the east of, perhaps southeast of the subject property. All those parcels are under 200 feet in width, would be approximately, have to be about 100 feet or so in height, and require an exception reduction to the 300 required setback. All those sites are determined not to be superior sites. The alternative analysis also evaluated all the TP zone parcels, which are the only other zone parcels that allow the facility. And all the timber preserve parcels are topographically higher than or equal to the subject property, but are either inaccessible due to trees or topography don't provide the coverage objective. Otherwise, they have lack of applicant owner interest, and that's included in that analysis as well. So I wanted to summarize that the sites located within the zone district that allow wireless facilities that either do not meet the carrier's service objective or are not viable or technically feasible. Due to the landlord disinterest, significant grading associated with development access, significantly greater visual impacts as would occur on Cherryvale, non-compliance with the minimum 300 foot setback for residential zoning. Furthermore, most of the properties in the search ring are either restricted or prohibited. And then of these sites, all are not technically feasible or viable. So there's no other site that would allow this that is technically feasible and viable, at least visually intrusive. So the applicant is prepared to speak on the alternative analysis, and I'll defer additional consideration of the alternative analysis to the applicant, or if you have any questions. Furthermore, the site is located 200 feet back from a ridge where visual impacts of the proposed facility would be more prominent. I mean, that's obvious to all of us here. However, to address visual issues as much as technically feasible, the code is very clear that it has to be the least visually intrusive site. The wireless facility is proposed as a faux monopine and appears like other pines around it. Furthermore, the pine is set back approximately 1,200 feet from Soquel San Jose Road. The frontage of the road is dotted with trees along the Seventh-day Adventist camp, almost entirely blocking views of the tower, and is otherwise sufficiently camouflaged as a pine tree. In this context, the design of the facility would minimize visual effects as much as technically feasible. However, the project is also conditioned to provide landscape screening to fill in some of those landscape gaps along Soquel San Jose Road. It's understood that the applicant does not have a lease area. However, I believe since it is proposed on the Seventh-day Adventist camp, I think that that's something that is reasonable to require. Views of the Seventh-day Adventist camp are not exactly that great looking as it is, so additional landscaping there would help block views of the Seventh-day Adventist camp. In addition, the facility is conditioned to provide natural colors around for the enclosure and landscaping to kind of soften the effect to neighbors. With regard to the proposed power poles that the applicant is proposing, 4 power poles, the project is conditioned to underground those, and the applicant has agreed to that condition of approval. The proposed facility meets the height requirements of the residential ag zone district insofar as the allowances in the code is 25 feet above the height limited for the district, which is 28 feet, which allows a maximum height of 53 feet. The proposed facility is 44 feet, meets that height standard without an exception to height. Otherwise, the project meets the general site standards for the residential ag district. In addition, meets the required 300-foot minimum setback to residentially zoned properties, which are located to the northeast, west, partially south. These setbacks are actually between 500 to 900 feet from property lines, so it exceeds that standard. And the intent of that setback is for visual impact, to minimize visual impacts to residential if at all possible. So as I noted, the project includes an updated RF report and meets the radio frequency standard established by the FCC. I did want to point out for the public that Section 47 of USC 332 C7B Roman numeral 4 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 forbids jurisdictions from regulating the placement, construction, or modifications of wireless communication facilities based on the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions if these emissions comply with the Federal Communications Commission standards. The RF report clearly indicates that the maximum RF emissions at the ground will be 1.3% of the FCC public exposure frequency level, and maximum calculated level at any nearby building would be 0.03% of the public exposure limit. As proposed, it meets the FCC regulations and as conditioned. The applicant also provided a noise study in the report concluding that the noise levels are within the general plan limit at the property line, notably that the proposed cabinets are 30.3 dBA at the property line. We have a 50 dBA standard and a 45 nighttime, so as you can see, it clearly meets that standard. The generator has a maximum calculated level of 37.5, again below the daytime and evening standard. The project includes an exemption for the wireless facility, given that the commercial structures such as the proposed project not exceeding 2,500 square feet, not involving significant amounts of hazardous substance, are provided an environmental exemption. In that case, no environmental evaluation is made, is simply exempt from CEQA. And there are no special circumstances that apply to the property insofar as it's not mapped biotic, not mapped as a scenic roadway, scenic resource area, archaeology, or otherwise. And this supports the determination for a CEQA exemption. And I did want to point out that the applicant, County Council, has authorized a shot clock extension for the applicant on this project, authorizing November 15th of this year, 2019, as a final action to approve or deny the application. So staff is recommending the project for approval today, and that the conditions of approval include undergrounding of the power to the facility site, eliminating the 4 power poles, landscaping around the equipment enclosure, additional landscaping along Soquel San Jose Road to close any gaps along the frontage, natural color materials. And then I wanted to note that the project is regularly conditioned to include a 90-day RF report following operation of the facility, confirming compliance with the FCC standard. And also, again, finding page 13, as I noted, into the record, So as proposed, conditioned and with revised findings, staff is recommending approval of the project and that you make a determination that the project is exempt from CEQA. And that concludes my presentation unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Very thorough. All right, I don't have any questions at this time. So with that, I will allow the applicant to make a presentation. Good morning.
Good morning. Tricia Knight representing Verizon Wireless this morning. It's been a long road to this site. We've been working on getting coverage to this area for about 6 years on and off, and met as early as last week with the IT department at the county about the need for coverage in these hard-to-reach canyons. Staff did a great job of summarizing. I wanted to see if you had any specific questions about the alternative site analysis or any of the coverage maps right now. I'll obviously be available to answer questions after public comment. I did also want to address one of the conditions as somewhat problematic, and I did speak to staff about it. Condition number 8, which is on page 18 of your staff report, does ask for landscaping. It's problematic for us for 2 reasons. One is that we are only have access to the lease area on the property, so we can landscape immediately adjacent around our fencing area as part of our lease, but anything outside of that is outside of our control. That's 1, and 2, the irrigation available to establish species is not really present at the facility or at the project site. So it's something for you to consider, maybe alternating that specific condition to allow landscaping for screening of our equipment area only. So something for your consideration.
While you're up here, Tricia, would you mind addressing the question that came up about regarding the recently improved wireless communication facility in Soquel at Wilson Tire, and how that would affect the coverage gap that you've identified?
Absolutely. Did you get a copy? There was a submitted yesterday, so it looks like this.
I did.
Okay, so it does analyze the facility, as Sheila had mentioned, is not constructed yet. But as you sort of, go through the pages of the report, so what differs with that facility and what we're talking about today is the Soquel Drive recently approved project is a small cell. Mm-hmm. So that really is a capacity site that will help to give faster data speeds and things closer to the users, closer to the downtown Soquel area. You'll see as you start to go through that really doesn't get up into the canyons that this specific facility is aiming to cover. And I think it does a pretty good illustration. Is there other questions that you have about that?
No, I just wanted to make sure that because this came a little bit later, that this had been addressed, because it was something that was an issue that was raised by someone who reached out to us, one of the attorneys for
And I brought extra maps and I'll put them at the back of the room as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. And then while you're up here, could you, I read the alternatives analysis, of course, and I'm wondering if you could just, since we have a fair number of members of the public here today, if you could talk a little bit about what Verizon does when they go out and look at these alternative sites. Like, how do you rule them out?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and we came prepared to answer that. So in working with staff over the years on various projects, what has come down to when we're in a restricted area, it becomes where we have to go around to everything that would be allowed and show why that would not work, show that we've approached property owners. And I did bring a packet just to enter into record to show that we send out certified mail to every property owner, and we agreed that about 2 to 3 weeks was an appropriate time to wait for a response. Some responses we got via email indicating they did not want to enter into a lease agreement, and some just did not respond in that 3-week time frame. But we do show that those attempts were made. We include those in the report itself. And so, I always sort of line up what it takes to construct a facility, and it's, can we lease the property? Is it constructible? Can we get utilities and the infrastructure needed to build it? Will it meet the RF coverage objective? And can it be supported by planning staff? So once all those line up, it's pretty rare. And so you'll see within the report, there are various reasons of one of those legs that doesn't line up.
Okay, thank you. And my understanding is there was some back and forth with between yourself and Sheila as far as getting that alternatives analysis to a place where we felt that you had adequately evaluated the
She was
alternatives.
hard on me, yes. We had to make sure we got everything that she had asked for and had proof of that effort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, I will now open up the public hearing. Everyone will have 3 minutes to speak about the item. Sheila mentioned this in her presentation, but and certainly people can comment on any aspect of the project that they would like to, but just to remind people that when it comes to the radio frequency levels, we rely on the reports prepared by the applicant unless we have a reason not to. And as Sheila mentioned, we have very limited purview over considering the radio frequency levels when we look at these towers. So what our purview is today in looking at these is not whether or not there's a need for coverage, what that coverage gap is, what the wireless facilities are intended to do, as long as Verizon establishes that there is a coverage gap and that they do comply with FCC regulations, then what we're then tasked with looking at is the location of that within the coverage area that they're looking to cover and the materials that they're using, and we try and work with the applicant to minimize visual impacts as much as possible. And so any comments that are in that vein are especially useful to me today, but I understand people are passionate about other aspects of wireless facilities, but I just wanted to put that out there. I also received, I'll put it out there that we received, I want to say, over 25 letters. Some in support, some in opposition to the proposed project, and I did read all of those. I read them yesterday, and we got a number of them this morning that I read. So I want to thank everyone for writing in as well if you're not present today, just for the record. So with that, I will open up the public hearing, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And please state your name for the record and your address as well, please. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Leslie Baxter. I'm an attorney from the Buddy Law Group. We represent Avi Benaroya, who owns the property at 1776 North Rodeo Gulch Road, which borders the subject property. The applicant here has failed to follow the county code, and the application should be denied. We've submitted a written objection to the application, and I'd like to talk about the legal requirements for this application. The code requires findings that it can be proven that there are no alternative non-residential sites from which can be provided the coverage needed to eliminate or substantially reduce significant gaps in the network. The applicant here hasn't proven those elements. They've only demonstrated a cursory glance at the timber producing zones where WCFs are actually allowed. And 8955 Glen Haven Road in particular illustrates this. They have no proof of written notification of any refusal to engage in co-location by the operator of the closest WCF as required by code. And this diligence and proof is just not there. The zoning administrator therefore can't make the findings to support the application. He must deny. The applicant is required to prove that the WCF would eliminate or substantially reduce one or more significant gaps in its network, and that there are no viable, technically feasible, and environmentally equivalent or superior potential alternatives. The diligence of the applicant is just lacking in the application. The residents and the property owners in this area behind me can speak much better than I can about the visual and aesthetic impacts of the tower. The legal support is Code Section 1310-660, which requires minimization of the impacts to community and aesthetic character of the community. Subpart B of the code section requires the finding that the appearance and integrity of the community is not marred by the unsightly facility. That can't be proven here, and I will let the neighbors speak to that. In summary, the legal aspects of this application are wanting, and the application should be denied.
Thank you. And I did read your letter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, Kevin Bowling, Tammy Weigel from the county's Information Technology Department. We're here to just let you know that this is a significant coverage issue for our public safety departments. The sheriff, fire, and ambulance depend upon mobile data computers with Verizon communications. There is no coverage up and down Soquel San Jose corridor, so they are in a hole and can't be contacted when they're in that area.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Susie Howe. My husband Doug Howe and I, our property borders Seventh-day Adventist. We bought our land in 1976. I walked down, we went through this in 2006. They applied for this. And I walked down our road Wednesday, and on Old San Jose Road, and I started counting. They're allowed 10 recreational vehicles, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 things. And, you know, I was up to 18, and I missed 3. And some neighbor talked to one of the people there that said he's lived there for 13 years. They rent it out only to the people in their congregation. I don't know, I thought in the beginning they were allowed at conference once a year for 2 weeks, and the recreational vehicles for 2 weeks on their property. I don't understand how. I think that's a zoning violation. I'm not good at this. I'm a preschool teacher. This is way above my pay grade. My husband has a pacemaker. We wouldn't even have a smartphone. Not a smartphone, what do you call it? A smart meter for our PG&E. Those people up on Rodeo Gulch, that organic farm across the way, where's our say? I mean, we don't get a say in any of this. The other thing was in the original, in the notice we got, it said it requires a commercial development permit and a determination that the project is exempt from further review under the California Environmental Quality Act. What is this? You know, I'm sorry. And the other thing, they said they can't deny it because of health reasons, but the letter I got in 2006 from you guys, the planning department, said the Board of Supervisors has enacted building codes, zoning regulations, and environmental protection ordinances to protect the health, welfare, and public safety of the community and to preserve and enhance the environmental resources of Santa Cruz. You know, I don't understand how Verizon can come and say, hey, no, everything's good, it's under the level of, and then I look things up, and it's insane of the health ramifications of this. You know, what about the homeowners? What about our property value? What about all of that? I don't understand how you can just let them do what they want for this whole 13 years and then, you know, grant them whatever they want. It's not right. So I just let the people who know what they're talking about as far as the cell towers do it. It's above. That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Becky Steinbrenner. I live in the Aptos Hills, but I work with the community of Soquel Village to appeal the Wilson Tire Verizon installation. And I want to clarify, and I'm sorry I got here late, that that installation also claimed it would provide service up into the canyon and down to Highway 1, which this facility's need assessment is also claiming. In the Verizon's application for Wilson Tire, they did not include at all the coverage that was afforded to the Soquel Canyon by the recently extended tower on Highway 1 above the Capitola Post Office that shoots with a Yagi directed beam into the canyon. I want some discussion about that and why this now Castle Agnos is needed. I want to know if the increased fire hazard has been studied. I didn't see anything about that in this, and with the rolling blackouts by PG&E for the next 10 years, there's significant emphasis on telecommunications to provide some sort of backup power for cell towers. Would this facility have a generator? Would it have battery? What would be the implications for wildland fire in this area due to these backup components? I want to know about this is on a ridge with wind. I live in Aptos, and I have seen one of these monopines that was put in, and now all of the plastic camouflage has been blown off because of the wind and degradation of UV. Has it been studied, the implications of this one having its materials blown off, being on a ridge, degrading, and falling to the ground where wildlife will eat it? I think this is a beautiful area, and we need to think about those creatures who also have no voice. There are multiple beekeepers in that canyon. Bees have been documented under hives under cell phone and high voltage wires to perish. I want to know that these beekeepers' livelihood will not suffer because of this new installation. And in reading the alternatives, I noted that some were dismissed because they would have been a public nuisance under code, and I'm sorry, I might have written this down wrong, 3279. How was that criteria met, and why doesn't it meet this one? Because being on the ridgetop, it will create an aesthetic eyesore that many in the canyon do not want. And how can others get a nuisance dismissal and this one not? I hope that the church, who is very concerned with health, has thoroughly polled its congregation. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Good morning.
Good morning. Bruce, you're photographing this?
Yep,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Hi, my name is James Owen Whitman. I've lived in this county since 1994, 180 Oak Ridge Road, now 23257. This whole situation really kind of bothers me. There's a bigger picture that people, I think, are just not aware of. So I wasn't quite sure what to do, so I woke up early this morning and wrote something, and I realized I should have possibly proofread it more and made sure I had my reading glasses. Here we go. Where is the precautionary principle? Do we blame Snickers, Baby Ruth, or the Gothchilds? Human beings are magnetic harmonic antennas that can send and receive data. As an example, the energy from a hug, smile, a firm handshake, or even a kiss. Has anyone in this room felt this energy before? And I'm going to edit some of this stuff. Hardly new wireless energy and magnetic biology. The new frequencies, since soon after World War I, have been found to do incredible damage to all aspects of life, also greatly heal. As an example, Dr. Royal Raymond Rafe's work starting in the late 1920s, extensively mostly hidden by Big Ag and Big Pharma. These newer EMF antennas are microwave ovens being installed all over the globe. And as in the US, any assembly under 140 feet is exempt from its required monitoring of its actual power capabilities. And these systems have great power supplies on a different grid than our homes. These newly being installed technologies are for artificial intelligence and population control. What is being called fifth generation 5G, kill grids, plug and play from light poles to thousands of satellites from above. Mr. Obama installed a 14-year lobbyist, Mr. Tom Wheeler, to help the FCC. The FCC is a captured agency. Bill Clinton, okay, I'm going to go faster. You can all research what Bill Clinton did. Of note, Men like Mr. Bruce Kane, I thank him for his bravery for publishing his work that he did in his presentation with the Dearborn Heights City Council July 23rd, 2019. I do not want the same results that he got in his city council. So of note, I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but I'd like to share. I will share what Rudolph Lorenzo Steiner wrote about his observations of several decades have how already humans have been altered by electrical energy in their retarded development. He wrote about this in 1924. Where is the precautionary principle? As these energies are indiscriminate, but will most affect our youth and our emergency responders. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, my name is Satya Ryan. One thing I'd like to, slow enough, when you're talking about safety, as Becky was talking about, many of these towers have caught fire. I have actually a picture of one, I'm going to give this to you, in Clovis, just recently spontaneously caught fire. When I think about that happening in the forest, it really concerns me. They are investigating this one, why it happened, but there's nothing in the area, no fires in the area. So, and there's many others too. I just wrote this one example to you. I've also sent this to you. I have great concern about there not being a CEQA study done. And I sent to you about the recent NRDC, National Resources Defense Council case appeal, and the ruling on that, stating that NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, saying that let me just read to you what it says. A federal appeals court has vacated and remanded the arbitrary and capricious FCC Commission's decision to allow AT&T, Verizon, and other wireless carrier cell phone facilities owners and operators to bypass historic preservation and environmental reviews. So this is a very significant ruling, and this is on the national level, but it should also apply to California as well. And so I'm giving you the ruling itself. But this is very important because in spite of what is, this definitely contradicts what the Telecommunication Act is saying, that no environmental effects can be considered. And the court is saying that this cannot be done. So I hope that you will review that. I am definitely in opposition to this tower, and I agree with what Becky said. I was at the hearings for Wilson's Tire antennas, and they did say that that antenna was meant to close gaps in coverage. I was there through the whole tedious process, so I remember it very well. We can't just say one thing one day and say another thing another day. We remember, and the neighbors that live in this area for a reason. They want to get away from this technology. They don't want more of it. I think there's people here today that will testify that they do get adequate coverage for Verizon. So I thank you for hearing us and carefully considering this, because the decision we make will be with us for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Brianna Hout. Our property borders the campground. I am opposed to the proposal for the Verizon cell tower. The current zoning and use permits allow for one event per year and 10 RVs on site the rest of the time. We all moved here, bought property, and built houses under the assumption that this would continue to be rural life, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. We moved here to get away from things, not to literally have them erected in our backyards. Seventh Day has not acted in good faith. They did not have notices up on their property until yesterday, and they are in violation of their current use permit by having more than the allotted numbers of RVs in the property, among other code violations. Because of this, they should not be granted a commercial zoning permit for anything on that land. The land should continue to be zoned for residential and agricultural only. This is clearly a case of greed by the church. They do not want to keep putting up temporary towers for their camp. So instead of Seventh Day paying for this each year, now Verizon will be paying them. The residents, neighbors in this community do not want or need a cell tower built on the land. We are the constituents in this county, and we are telling you loudly that this is not something that should be approved. I'm not going to get into the potential health hazards of this, as stated before, but wireless technology is a relatively recent phenomenon, and 5G even more so. The truth is, experts are still unsure how it affects our health, our well-being, or our environment. We are not willing to risk our health or the health of our children finding the answer to this, and Seventh Day shouldn't either. Environmental review should not be exempt from CEQA for several reasons. One of these is that a prerequisite for this is that the proposed location of the project and the conditions under which it would be operated or maintained will not be detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of persons residing or working in the neighborhood. Verizon found that criteria to be met, and I am standing here to tell you that it has not. In every photo of the tower that you have seen, you've also seen a photo of our house. We cannot look out our windows without having this tower in our view. This is toxic trespassing. It devalues our property and is being pushed forward against the express wishes of the neighbors. There would have been more of us here today saying the same thing, but we were not given enough time to plan and organize, especially since most of us are without power. Verizon claims the design of this tower to be stealth. The only thing stealth about this was how it's made its way back into this hearing room. This proposal is not in line with the values or needs of this community, and I implore you to reject it today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Morgan Shane, and I came today to suggest and invite you to pay attention to the gray areas and be willing to do the research. There's a tremendous amount of facts on the internet of health implications that have occurred because of 5G installations, even though those are being cited as not being official and authentic. There are things that are happening to people, and we can find out about them if we bother to do the research. And my invitation is that you side with the people of this county, especially on any gray areas, and we keep asking ourselves, what's the big push for? Why is it so necessary to have this technology be incorporated into our community so quickly? I live in Live Oak. It's absolutely a mess. I invite anyone here to go and drive down the streets and see what's happening. Every utility pole is so laden with fiber optic cables going in every direction that it won't take much of a storm to bring these utility poles down. It's absolutely insane how it's being put up. I listened to a very comprehensive presentation by some people who are supposedly connected with the big international companies that are behind this and pushing this. Two that I know of for sure. One is called Serco. It's very difficult to find any information about them. And another called Crown Castle, and their trucks are in Santa Cruz installing 5G. And there are some nebulous international corporation, billions and billions of dollars corporation that we can't even know about. So I'd say slow down and slow down some more. There's really no reason why this technology has to drive policy, which is what these people were saying, that this technology is so important that it has to set the policy rather than the policy regulate the technology. Well, that policy happens to be our laws, and it happens to be things that we have put into place to protect ourselves. So I'm asking you to stand with the community on this and just let it slow down and let us find out more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Harvey. I'm a property owner on the adjacent road, Los Robles Road, located to the Seventh-day Adventist campground. I live there with my wife and 3 young kids, ages 2, 4, and 6, whose brains are still developing, whose skulls are thinner than the rest of ours, and I surely have concerns about something compromising that in my backyard. That said, we moved to this particular area to get away from stuff like this. We like living in a rural community. The SDA campground was a concern when we bought, of course, because it is a unique property. It's 80-some acres and not exactly residential. So I looked into it to see what threat does this property pose to my family's idea of living in the mountains, living with nature, and living in a rural setting. And there are significant restrictions on what they're allowed to do with the property. This is the once-a-year conference, and they do a great job with that. I have no complaints, and they've always been respectful with that. And then they also, my understanding is, can have a number of recreational vehicles at various times during the year, but not the big camp. They often have more than the 12 that they're allotted under use permit 81-554-U, but I don't call on them because I want to be a good neighbor. That takes me to the 3 issues I have with the findings that were in the staff report. 1, they are out of compliance with existing permitted uses. I guess it's our fault for not reporting them for violations every time it occurs, every time they have more than a dozen vehicles outside of that camp time. But I don't know that our efforts to be a good neighbor to them should be used against us in that sense. The second is that there are requirement of findings for compatibility with the adjacent property uses. These are homes and farms. A commercial use is incompatible. That's page 14, finding number 3. And the last finding I would take issue with is that the project must, quote, complement and harmonize with that community, page 15, finding number 5. There are some mental gymnastics that take place in order for a cell tower located in a residential and agricultural district to be deemed to complement and harmonize. And I ask, how do we protect rural communities when words are meaningless? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, my name is Lois Dickman. I'm here as a property owner. Our property abuts the Seventh-day Adventist campground. Right from the front of our property, we can see this tower. I don't see how on earth any tree is going to grow up around it to hide it. It's right in our front yard. I'm concerned with our other neighbors about the aesthetic value. The health issues have already been addressed, but aesthetically, it's not very nice for us to walk in our front yard and see this big tower ahead of us. And as I say, I don't see how they can plant trees to hide it. Secondly, I'm very concerned about the value of our property. I have talked to numerous people, some of them looking for homes, some of them wanting to buy homes, and I've asked them, would you buy a home that is close to a cell tower? And every time that the person has answered me, truthfully, they say, no, we would not consider buying a home that close to a cell tower. So I am asking all of you to reconsider all of those of us who have lived there for almost 40 years and enjoyed the beautiful environment. We wish to have that for our grandchildren that come and visit and love our place. And we want it to continue for generations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Magrenay. We have lived bordering the Seventh-day Adventist for over 30 years. So I have a question for staff. Can I actually get an answer or not?
You can ask a question and
I can ask the question, okay. My understanding is that the conference grounds, they have, yes, the rural agricultural zoning, but there's a subset. And if you look on the GIS website, their zoning is not-for-profit campgrounds. So my question is, and on top of that, there is a use permit for when they have the festivals that begin on the 3rd Saturday of July for 11 days. And it affects mostly the upper meadow, which is where the cell tower would go. So the question is, does not the use permit have to, well, does it allow a cell tower? Question one. And if it does or doesn't allow, does it not require then a change to the use permit in order to put a cell tower? That would be the second question.
Thank
No-
you.
no answers?
I'm going to take all the public comments and then I'm going to address
Okay.
all the questions.
Are we able, I have come down over the years numerous times to get a copy of the existing use permit. I have never been able to get one. Is that something that we can get in paper for ourselves?
Just to clarify, when you say you haven't been able to
The
get one,
existing use permit.
is it because,
I have come down, I've gone to planning, and they say, oh, it's on somebody's desk, it's not in the file. It may be in storage in San Jose. I have never gotten it. So I would like a copy of that.
okay,
Is that a reasonable request?
you can make it upstairs, definitely, or downstairs, I should say.
So maybe not a reasonable request.
It is, but I can't produce that for you right now.
Do you have a name of someone that can produce it?
Downstairs in our records room, you can request.
Oh, I've been there numerous times. It never comes out.
Okay, well, one of us would be happy to help you out in a different setting to try and locate that information.
Thank you for your time.
May I clarify before you leave, sir? Are you, is your home, the white house that's sort of at 11 o'clock, I'm looking at?
No, if you are standing with your back towards where the tower is now, the proposed tower,
Yeah.
and you look not towards Old San Jose, Soquel, but you look towards Rodeo Gulch, you see two houses.
Yes,
One is an old Spanish,
right,
and one is a star-shaped.
right.
Both of those are mine.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
My name is Larry Lott. I'm here as an outsider from the frontiers up at the end of Soquel, San Jose Road up on the summit. And I'm here to do two things. I wanted to check on the intensity of this discussion, and I want to support Verizon wholeheartedly. We're living through 50 years up there of neglect from the county road system, from our power supplier, PG&E, and from our own foolishness of thinking that every tree that grows has to be preserved. We have a dark spot, too, a black spot, or whatever. What do you guys call it?
A coverage gap.
A coverage area. And it turns out the residents in our east end, southeast end, which is about a 4-mile area, all the way down to Soquel, have almost no cell phone coverage. Last week, we had the second power outage was varied from 2 to 3 days. Everything went down. We spent 7 years getting Comcast in a local area, a local community facility, getting internet up there. That was down. So for 3.5 days, we had no coverage except a cell phone tower. I guess it's on the west side of 17. And I gotta tell you, when you take 1,000 households and try and have them hook their phone up to a hotspot on that cell tower, the data rates were absurd, low. So I live in a community, and I have for 50 years, that probably has even a more diverse set of opinions on pretty much any topic you could bring up. But we need coverage up there. It's the only way we're going to exist in a very serious forested area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rahmat Martin. I'm a 46-year resident of the Upper Soquel Valley. I just returned about 11 o'clock last night from 2 weeks away from home and opened my email this morning, and 1,500 pieces of email coming in, and looking back just for a day and a half, I see evidence of this whole project coming forward. I didn't know anything about this, and I've been in the valley long enough to remember that it was some 15 or 20 years ago that Verizon tried to make a deal with the Seventh-day Adventist to put a tower there. And the entire mountain school families came out against that, as did all of us who live in the valley. And I talked to you briefly as a Stanford University science engineering graduate. I spent most of my life, my working life, in the telecoms industry. I know very well how dangerous it is to even work or repair telecoms devices. And I have a mobile phone. I had to travel the country in a time when there was no such thing as a mobile phone or cell phone. We rely upon Comcast landlines for our basic home service, but I tell all of my clients, customers, if you can't reach me, just leave a message. I'll catch up to you as soon as service is restored. We don't miss mobile coverage at all, but I know very well this is not something that is healthy for any of us. It's not healthy for the environment. I have two cousins who lived close to a cell tower over in Tracy. They both died from cancer. It is a cancer-causing situation to live in the vicinity of a cell tower. And as other people have already talked this morning about animals, bees, wildlife, I can assure you this is not a good idea. We do not need cell towers. We do not need mobile phones. We don't need mobile coverage. Those of us who live in the country came to live in the country because we like nature. We raise our own gardens. We have about a 2-acre family farm. We grow most of our own vegetables. We do very fine, and I would never live near a cell tower. So please take all of this information to heart.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rima Anthony, and I don't live far away from that cell tower in North Rodeo. This cell tower would have the equivalent height of a 4-story building. Imagine it, 4 stories. And the county is suggesting that it be CEQA exempt? Are you serious? No environmental review on such a high tower? We're going to be looking up on that. There are many issues with this property. It's not zoned for such a project, and it is a fire hazard. It's in a fire hazard zone, and there is not enough water to fight a fire in that area. So by passing this, if you pass this, this would be considered a county code violation. So please deny this project. We didn't want it 10 years ago, and we don't want it now. When Verizon went ahead and talked about the Wilson tire, they mentioned that this Wilson tire would cover the distance all the way up the canyon. So they're lying by saying there's not enough coverage. Please deny it, because this would be a county code violation if you pass this. Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Doug Hout, and I'm a property owner right next to Seventh-day Adventist. And we're kind of going through something that we went through a while back, 10 years ago, and it was totally denied. I don't know why we're having the same argument again. I mean, the changes that they want to present us hasn't changed. The health issues are still kind of a gray area, and all I know is that this thing's going to be beaming down on my bedroom every night, so I'm not real happy with that. I got a pacemaker. These Verizon people have not proved to me that this is safe, and I've read a lot of articles about the hazards of these cell towers. And if they want a cell tower to cover that Soquel Avenue area or in the canyon there, why don't they put it up in Nicement Park? I mean, put it up so it's not close to houses, and you could get all the coverage you want from up there. I don't see why they have to put it right there at Seventh-day Adventist. I'm sorry, I'm just not for it at all.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item today?
here. Yes, it was in 2005 that we were here, and I also requested the material submitted opposing that cell tower at that time by the Sprint be entered into the record. I was brought up to believe this was a government of, for, and by the people. Instead, what we're seeing in reality is of, for, and by the corporations. Which side are you on? And these corporations pollute and they dictate, and they wrote the Telecom Act of 1996. No person or child has authorized 24/7 toxic trespass with microwave radiation 24/7. And we do not consent to violations of our health or safety or constitutional or property rights. And this is a fact. Cell tower radiation causes cancer. 17 studies around the world have shown, due to proximity to cell towers, increased cancer incidence, people experiencing insomnia, fatigue, memory loss, heart problems, diabetes, and the list goes on. This is not a matter of debate, it's a matter of scientific evidence. In 2005, teachers and community members and Mountain Elementary School Board wrote a letter to the Seventh-day Adventist saying, "We are entrusted with the well-being of children. Please do not put a cell tower so close to our school." And that inspired Santa Cruz City School Superintendent, who had a similar situation, to write a letter that I will submit. And he said, "We are asking that all decisions involving the installation of cell towers be put on hold and that prudent caution be exercised until all such towers are proven conclusively to be safe." Proven conclusively to be safe. They can't be. The evidence is otherwise. And I also refer you to the name of Barry Trower, whose expertise is microwave radiation weaponry. That's what this is.
Thank you.
Deny this project.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any additional members that may be on? Good morning.
Yeah, Bruce Cannon. We've entered into a situation where a technology which is massively desired by corporate and, let's say, forces of social control and surveillance is being forced on the population worldwide, and particularly in the advanced Western countries. Oh, of course, and in China as well. At the moment, the average exposure in the West is 1 quintillion. That's a 1 with 15 zeros behind it, times the natural background radiation of the planet. There has never been a situation in human history that is remotely similar to this. There's already an epidemic of damage from this frequency onslaught, and it's largely being covered up. It's being called other kinds of diseases. The quality of sleep for the population in the West has deteriorated radically. This is having a tremendous impact on people's ability to think critically, which we see reflected in the way that there is social controversy developing off the charts now. Children are being completely sabotaged in their development. They're unable to make the progress the humans have naturally needed to make in order to survive and thrive on this planet. And we see a situation where the government is now completely complicit. The FCC is a captured agency. The county of Santa Cruz is a captured government. They are acting in behalf of these corporations. And this is being forced on people without consent. And there is absolutely no consideration of the precautionary principle, which has been mentioned several times. But that doesn't seem to get across. This is an extremely dangerous situation. And we really need to admit that there's a problem and quit trying to gloss it over. Thank you.
Are there any additional members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Okay, I'm seeing none. Thank you for all of the comments. I really appreciate it. I'm going to, I'd like to take a little recess, if you don't mind. I have a couple of questions that I need to answer downstairs. I want to take a look at a couple of things associated with the use permit, if I can, and the Wilson Tire project. So I am going to take a break until 10:30 and we'll reconvene.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna start, so if you're in the middle of a conversation, please take it out in the hallway. Sorry about that brief recess. I wanted to take a look at the use permit for the Seventh-day Adventist property, and Sheila has that use permit. Sheila, is there anything in that use permit approval that would preclude?
No, it was a minor, a permit allowed the 12 recreational vehicle spaces per year. No conditions of approval preclude activity on the upper bench of the property. It's not the planning department's practice to amend a development permit if that development permit has no association with the use on the site. So we would apply, that's why we applied for a commercial development permit standalone for this use. Since it's not a proposed intensification of the Adventist activities, that's how we approach it typically.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate that since it didn't come through super clearly. There is an existing use permit for the Seventh-day Adventist property, and we have those records. If you'd like to get a copy of those next Monday. And there is nothing in that use permit that would preclude issuing a commercial development permit for a wireless facility. I have seen in the past where we've amended use permits for facilities, and so the reason we're running a little bit late here is I wanted to check in with the zoning administrator, who's the planning director, to make sure that it would not be a misstep for us to not amend the permit, and she said it would not. So we're kosher with the use permit and layering the commercial development permit over that use permit should we move forward with making a decision on the tower. So sorry about that. We had to go deep into the record archives for that one. But I think that was a very good question that was raised by a member of the public. And I also wanted to just say that if folks have issues with activities associated with that property, that they should, that the proper avenue for getting a response on activities out there is to reach out to our code enforcement division. Right now at this hearing, we're not looking at the operation of the Seventh-day Adventist and how many campers they have out there, and et cetera. So there's an avenue for that. I wanted to ask, I looked again at the records associated with Wilson Tire, that wireless communications facility that was proposed out there. And I'm sorry, Tricia, would you mind? I just want to, I'm not seeing anything in the record that shows that the Wilson Tire facility would achieve the goal of providing coverage in your coverage gap area that you're attempting to cover. Is that correct?
That is correct. I do have the RF engineer with me that can answer a little bit more if you want more detailed information about that. But it's just a small cell versus what we call a macro, which this is. This is a larger facility, backup generators, small cell, very small in nature, covering maybe a quarter mile in the downtown Soquel area. It just doesn't have the power. It will all work within the network and the maps that we submitted to you. You can see how they all connect,
Yeah.
but it's just not enough to get into that canyon.
Okay, so that tower, or the facility I should call it, at Wilson Tire, that is more, that is like a lower reaching in Soquel Village type of situation, is that correct? That's
Yeah,
what
it's
like
what we
on the
call
map.
capacity, targeted capacity small cell. So it is to handle the high capacity that we get down there from the school and downtown. The coverage radius on those are only about a quarter mile. The antennas are, I think, 18 feet off the ground. Very small antennas, very small power. A very targeted capacity solution, whereas what we're proposing here is to try to cover a much broader area. This is approximately a 2 mile, or capable of covering 2 miles depending on terrain and vegetation.
Okay, and since you're up here, the RF report, and Sheila corrected the information in the staff report to reflect that the emissions will be 1.3% of the allowed.
A maximum allowable public.
And I would imagine the further you get away from the tower,
It
more dispersed that becomes.
drops off at the inverse square of the distance. So each time you double the distance away, you cut the tower in half twice.
and something that I just find kind of fascinating is, folks are concerned about wireless facilities, and I understand why. But we had a hearing item on a facility that was down in Live Oak, and I recall hearing the numbers associated with the radio frequency numbers associated with the radio station that was down in Soquel, and it was like, I don't know, like 1,000-fold a wireless communication facility. I can't remember. I mean, it was significantly more. I mean, there are other types of facilities that are emitting these types of.
Correct. The fluorescent lights that are above your head are emitting wireless frequencies. There's Wi-Fi in this room. You're in this room. You're in a stronger radio frequency environment than anyone will be from that cell site.
And how? I mean, is there? Is there a way to accomplish filling this gap, accomplishing your needs of addressing this data coverage gap by co-locating? Somebody mentioned that you didn't look carefully enough at co-locating with another, I can't remember.
So I've been up there.
Yeah.
I was up there 6 years ago looking. There is no tower there at that location. A company has went into contract with the landowner there to, at some point, construct a tower. And yes, we have looked at that. That would be an addition to this site. As far north as it is, it's a site that we would like to have, but it doesn't feel that there would be a large gap in this area that wouldn't connect back to the existing downtown Soquel area.
Okay.
So I think, but how I think that she was referring to the post office
Yeah.
tower, and I believe that's in the co-location opportunity map included in the alternative analysis. The alternative analysis says that there are no co-locatable structures except those along Highway 1, but those won't penetrate the area. Can you speak to that? I think
Yeah.
that's what the neighbor was suggesting, that that site, the post office, could be available to serve this area.
We already have sites down on the Highway 1 area, and it's too far in the terrain, the way you're going up through the canyon there. They don't reach up into this particular area.
Okay, and that includes the post office site, is that
Yeah.
what you're talking about, Sheila?
Yeah, so you're saying that that post office site can't serve the search area that's included in your alternative analysis?
That is correct.
And how about microcells, the smaller facilities that are mounted on poles and such? Is that something that would be?
One of the goals that I wanted with this project was to improve safety within this area. Small cells are always an alternative that we can use. However, they don't have battery backup, and they tend to be very prone to failure during a public safety power shutdown. They lose power and you lose that portion of your network. Because this is an area where there is a fire danger, I wanted something that would provide safety in case we do end up with a fire in that area, that the notifications could go out, that would aid in the evacuation of people. And that's not achieved with small cells.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
It does, so this is really to provide, this coverage is intended to provide emergency coverage
Correct.
for notifications that would come to people.
For the community,
For
yeah.
the community, and I do recall that Kevin Bowling with our IT department did speak. He was the first speaker, one of the first speakers today, who did indicate that there is such a gap out there. To date, I've never actually seen anybody from our IT department come up and speak about this issue, so that was sort of surprising, and that indicates to me that they're very well is in need. Okay, thank you. Actually, while you're up here, Tricia, or maybe while you're here as well, I'm wondering, when I went out to the site, it looked to me like view impacts from Soquel San Jose Road were going to be minimal. And I appreciate you putting up the mock tower. It was very helpful. I would never have found this site otherwise. And I did go up there and I took a look at it. What I'm wondering is, from the vantage point of Michael's property, who spoke earlier, and he also wrote a letter that I read. I took a look at that while I was up there, and it seems like there's an opportunity, at least in my mind, to move the tower back a little bit. It's all flat, and that seems to me like it would improve views, the minimal views, the view impacts from Soquel San Jose Road, which aren't protected under the code, but just, all things be created equal, if we could actually minimize that even further, it seems like a good idea. It also seems like it would minimize impacts, which are, again, minimal, I would say, from the neighboring property vantage point. Is that something that you could do, is scooch it back? Because it looks like it's just as flat and just as open.
If you look at the photo sims that are included in your packet, you can see there is trees to consider. We were actually further down the hill and moved up, so if you get up onto the property, I don't know if you got to go close to where we actually are going to be locating.
Yeah.
It goes uphill.
It did.
And so we moved it up the hill at a recommendation of the geologist due to some concerns that he had about the stability of the soils.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved it to that area. with that said, we also dropped it in height. There's the trees that are in the immediate vicinity. It has to be pretty strategically placed to get through those trees to get the coverage in the canyon that we're talking about. So I'm not saying no, I'll let Dwayne speak to that as well, but we had moved it around. I just wanted to.
It might be something that just needs to be looked at,
Okay.
because I would imagine you have to run some numbers on that. But I feel like it wouldn't take much to improve it even further.
Just as a general rule, would that mean a tabletop? When you start moving back from the edge of a tabletop, you start having to move your tower up in height. So, is it possible? Yes, anything is possible, but it's likely that I would need additional elevation in order to achieve the same coverage from moving it back.
Likely, but not certain. You'd have to take a look at it, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And I just want to confirm with Sheila, and I know, and I think Tricia, since you already sat down, you could just nod to me, but the on-site notice has been erected at the site, yes.
People are driving by 60 miles an hour.
Okay, so the county code requires that a large sign be posted on the property, and that was posted in October. It's at the frontage entry to the Seventh-day Adventist facility. And in addition, the code requires the public noticing within 1,000 feet, posting notice for the public hearing on the site, and that was done as well. We have an affidavit for both the large sign and the posting. And then so individual property owners get posted within 1,000 feet. And then of course there's a notice in the general circulation in the paper, as well as all the board members get noticed as well. So unless additional people request specific noticing, that they would have been included, but no one did request noticing. So all the noticing is done according to the code requirements.
Okay, thank you. All right. I just wanted to reiterate that, because there was a comment that was made earlier about the jurisdiction's ability to apply environmental review, and that we cannot bypass environmental review, and that we are required to consider environmental impacts. And I want to reiterate that we do environmental review on these projects. It's not circumvented because it's a wireless project. That is something that still applies, which is CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, and there are criteria established under CEQA that we review applications against. So Sheila did do that as part of this project. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, health impacts are not one of those things. That is something that I might have an opinion about that is otherwise, but it doesn't get to enter into my decision today. I would absolutely encourage everybody here who has concern with these towers and you know, radio frequencies and at levels of associated with these facilities, and you know, cell phone coverage rights and all the things that come into play here, to continue to reach out to your local politicians. It's something that I just do not have power over here in this room.
So may I interject some additional comments regarding that secret determination?
Yes.
The public meeting regarding fire.
Yep.
Comments were made regarding fire hazard.
Oh, yeah.
What can, you know, how this can be proposed in a fire hazard area. I did want to note that the site is not mapped for moderate or critical fire hazard, so this is not a mapped fire hazard area.
Okay.
This site is flat. It's upwards of 200 feet from the nearest shrubs or trees. So the extent of vegetation is grass in this location. So in addition, the The proposed facility will meet the minimum fire clearance standard established by the fire agency. As you all know, it's 100 feet. That plus some will be at least a couple hundred feet around the facility, so it's going to be a standalone facility. So there is no special circumstance in this situation that would demand additional evaluation with regard to fire protection.
Okay, but I just want to piggybacking on that, when the building permit comes through, the fire agency would be reviewing the application and applying any fire code related regulations to.
Absolutely, and insofar as the safety of the actual pole, the applicant indicated that the geotechnical, the county geologist required analysis relocation. It was originally proposed along the very edge of the ridge, and that was determined to be unsuitable due to slope stability issues. So there has been a geotech report accepted on this site for the facility. The building permit would be required the foundation of the facility would be required to comply with those foundation requirements so they could withstand any seismic pressures, or be it shaking, liquefaction, anything that might occur in the area, earthquakes otherwise. And it will be designed to meet the California Building Code, so it's not anticipated to result in any safety issues as a result of operation, as well as subject to review by the fire agency, like you indicated, environmental health, or the operation of the facility, as well as compliance with the FCC standards regarding operational and worker safety requirements for the facility in terms of RF protection. I mean, like some gentleman indicated, danger is for the operational staff responsible for maintaining it, so they have to shut down the facility to maintain it. So there are worker safety requirements required by the FCC, and those are implemented into the plans and construction documents for construction purposes.
Okay.
And that these facilities typically include a shutoff valve for emergency personnel, for fire safety personnel, so they're not going to get zapped should they have to deal with the facility. That would be for the actual workers too.
Right, and the way these work, my understanding is, it's powered by electricity, and in the case that the electricity is cut off, which happened recently, this last week, that the generator kicks in and powers up the facility so that wireless coverage is still provided in an emergency situation, which is detrimental to public safety. And I did see some fire personnel here earlier listening, and we've had fire personnel speak about these projects in the past, and we had somebody from IT speak on it as well, that this is just an example of where we need these types. This last week shows why we need these types of services in an emergency situation. The way the generators are installed, the fire safety criteria and installation criteria, we don't just let them throw them on the grass. There's standards for this type of stuff, just that there's generators all over the place that have to meet certain requirements. And it's the ones that don't meet the requirements that start fires, and anybody in the fire district could tell you that. I've heard some stories about that, and it's not the properly installed generators that are causing the fires. Okay, well, I feel like, first I just want to say, Sheila, you put a tremendous amount of work into this application. In looking at the record, you requested additional analysis and the alternatives analysis that Verizon provided multiple times. You worked with them to get them in the least visually intrusive area feasible. The tower is one of the lowest in height facilities that I've seen since I've been doing this, and I feel like with how visible that property is and the ridge line is, this is really one of the best locations that I can see on the property where this could go, knowing and understanding that there are no feasible alternative locations within the coverage gap that you could provide this facility. I do think that And I just, you know, I don't really see grounds to not support the application. Unfortunately, I know it's hard to hear for the neighbors, but I really, yeah, it's a tough position to be put in as a county staff person and to evaluate this. These ones are always really tricky. I think that there could be some improvement made to the view from Michael's home. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm saying Colin, I'm addressing this property owner vice first name because I can't recall how to pronounce his last name, but he is the property owner who has the two homes, like 11 o'clock from the towers, looking at the towers from the road. And I would really like Verizon to take a look at that view angle and see if there's an opportunity to move the tower back a little bit, because there's a little bit of a knoll with trees that comes in between where the proposed tower is and his properties, and I feel like by moving the tower back just a little bit, it's going to clip off his view of it entirely.
Is that, you mean to the north?
I think it is to the north. Yeah. And that will also help the view impacts from Soquel San Jose Road. I tend to agree actually with the comment that you made, Tricia, about the landscaping from Soquel San Jose Road. I feel like, you know, the vantage point when I feel like that a tree would have to be pretty tall at Soquel San Jose Road to really effectively screen something that is that high in elevation. So I would prefer to look at screening at the enclosure and looking at moving the entire facility north a little bit. So my recommendation would be to strike condition of approval 8. And I like the condition of approval where you asked for the enclosure to be earth tone. So that's fantastic. I think that we should take a look at, I think you should, then you asked for a color sample, perfect. I was gonna say we should ask for that. So let's add a condition of approval requesting that, that the applicant relocate the wireless communication facility to the north to the extent feasible, and you would need to show why it would not be feasible, to improve upon the view angle from the vantage point of Soquel San Jose Road and the neighboring properties to the northwest. And maybe if you could just provide some sightline information. And
Can I interrupt you for a moment?
yeah,
I thought that the project was conditioned to require landscaping around the enclosure. I'm not seeing that language. I just want to make sure that if that's intended, that we add that language.
I'm not seeing that either, and I think that would be great. The only thing I'm wondering is about irrigation. It's pretty dry up there. Is there a way to water? Oh, Tricia?
We utilize gel packs until establishment, so we would obviously be picking a drought tolerant species, and we'll work with staff on that. But we have gel packs that we use that don't require any water tanks or irrigation, and they work up for about I think it's about 18 months before it's established and can survive on its own.
Okay, thank you. I think that we can add a condition of approval that requires landscaping on the west side of that enclosure. That's the side that's facing the neighboring properties. I don't think there's any benefit in landscaping any other side of that enclosure because it's not going to be visible from the vantage point of Soquel San Jose Road or anywhere else. So please take a look at the opportunities to move that tower back further. I think for every foot that it's moved back, if you don't have to increase the height of the structure, will make a big difference.
So do you want to add a condition then, condition 10, or
Yeah, add a condition,
condition something to read, applicant shall
provide,
move the tower north
As
to achieve, to block views from the west as if feasible?
yes.
And then otherwise, an additional condition to say that the advanced landscape plan shall be provided along the west side of the enclosure, providing drought tolerant species with temporary irrigation.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, those conditions will be renumbered since you struck 8.
Right. Yeah, if you draft those up, we'll take a look at those this afternoon, but it sounds like we've captured for the record the intent.
Can I just say something? If you move it north, you're gonna move it into Dr. Morris's house.
I'm sorry, the public comment period is over. We will take a look at, I'm gonna take a look at that analysis. When I'm talking about moving it north, I'm talking about feet, not yards or meters.
Moving it closer or to our property and/or our view would be impacted in some fashion.
Right.
I'm gonna take a look at it. I'm gonna go up there and I'm gonna take a look at it. I was up there yesterday and I am aware of the situation up there. We're gonna have Verizon give us view angles. I'm gonna reiterate right now, as it is proposed, I think that the view impacts are considered as much as they can be, considering the fact that there's going to be a wireless communication facility on the property. I don't think that we necessarily need to address this view impact, but I do think that there could be some adjustments made that will improve the situation further from a view impact perspective, understanding that the view impacts are negligible at this point, but I think we could make them even less so. So I'm gonna take a look at that, and
If I could add that the public member that just spoke dropped off communications to you while you were on break.
I saw
And that was
that.
provided to you, so they didn't have an opportunity to speak regarding this issue.
Okay. Well, I think for the benefit of the public, just understand that the application as proposed, I'm prepared to approve as designed right now. So if you're inclined to appeal the approval, or have further concerns, it's stayed at this moment. When I'm talking about moving it north, I'm talking about 15 feet, 20 feet max. I'm not talking hundreds, so that's what we're looking at as far as the approval and the condition of approval. Just so you understand, you're out there and you're taking a look at it yourself, what I'm talking about here. So with that, I will move to approve application 171365, consistent with the findings as amended, that one finding amended by Sheila earlier, indicating 1.3% RF, and with the conditions of approval as amended today by myself and Sheila, with your help, thank you very much. And I will further determine the project is exempt from further review under the California Environmental Quality Act. And I thank you very much for coming today. And with that, we're going to move on to the second item